Hey guys, Michael Hyatt here. Welcome to the Michael Hyatt Show. This is the pre-show. We're going to go here for about 8 minutes or so, and then we'll go ahead and start the show. But I want to ask tonight, where are you watching from? So I'm in Nashville, Tennessee tonight, at home, after about a 10-day vacation. We didn't have the show last week, in case anybody noticed. But I'm thrilled that you're with us, and I would be grateful if you'd share the show as we're going through this pre-show and getting all of our settings right. But where are you watching from? And I'm going to look here. I can see Periscope getting some hearts there, which is fantastic. I got to get my comments up here. Napoleon from Bolivia. Somebody from San Diego. Looks like Jill from Burlington and New Jersey and Claremont, Florida. This is all on Periscope. Lubbock, North Carolina. Montgomery, Alabama. All right. I'm just trying to find the show on Facebook. I'm coming up dry. So YouTube, anybody watching on YouTube tonight? Let me just get the chat feature up here. Yeah. Elsa Bentz says hello from San Jose, California. Sheena Mendez from the Philippines. Fantastic. Let me see if I can get this up on my phone because it is not working on the main computer. This is why we've got the pre-show, so we can get all this stuff ironed out, right? All righty. Always fun times with any time you're doing something techie. But I can see you guys again. Oh, there we go. Fantastic. Anytime you're doing something techie. All righty. Now let's turn the volume down on that. All right. Chelsea says, sleeping is one of my favorite pastimes. Excited to hear tonight's show. You guys are going to love this show. Shawn Stevenson is the bomb. I'm like a sleep enthusiast, but Shawn is a bona fide sleep expert. And so if you've got any questions about sleep, if you want to sleep longer, if you want to have better quality sleep, Shawn's your guy. And we're going to get to all your questions during the show. So Mike this is on Facebook, Mike is watching from Toronto, Luria from Portland, Clay from Laurel, Mississippi, Crystal from Clarksville, Tennessee. Wasn't there a song about that from the Monkees? I think there was. John from Summerall, Mississippi. Bonnie from St. Louis. Nancy. Fantastic. John, Douglas. Bunch of folks getting on. Awesome, guys. Great to see you. Okay, I've got another question. I'm going to switch over here to the main camera here for a second. But here's the question. On average, let's just pretend we're on the honest planet tonight, okay? So on average, how many hours of sleep do you get each night? Now, I can tell you this, about 12 years ago, 10 years ago, I was getting on average 5 or 6 hours of sleep a night. That's not what I get now. I get usually between 7 and 8 now on average, but it's because I've implemented many of the things that Shawn teaches in his great book, Sleep Smarter. In fact, I'm reading it through for the second time. I'm reading it with my wife, Gail. Phenomenal book. So again, if you guys, during this pre-show, go ahead and answer the question, but go ahead and share it out too. That'd be helpful. On average, how many hours of sleep do you get each night? So let me switch over here and look. I am still not getting the broadcast thing to work here on Periscope, but that's all right. It's all good. All good, good, good. Yeah, Stacy says, whoa, 8 hours. That was on Periscope. That's just not going to work for me. Okay, no big deal. So I see Byron on YouTube, Nancy on YouTube. She says, I love to sleep and can sleep anywhere, and I do. Don't know if I'd survive without my 20-minute power nap. And she gets on average 9 hours. Man, that's pretty impressive. That's really impressive. Okay, and then as we look back on Facebook. So Maria says only around 6. John says 5.7. Crystal says 7. Nancy says 7 to 8 always. Good for you, Nancy. Proud of you. Vassal says 9. Whoa, awesome. Bonnie says 7. Clay says 5. Jerry says 7. Jamie 4 to 5. Luria 5 to 7. Luria, we got to talk. Mike 5 to 6. Scott 7. Anina says 8, and John says used to get 8, have a 6-week-old, so that's long gone. I feel you on that. It's tough when you've got those small critters in the house to get as much sleep as you need. But having the right kind of sleep and having sufficient sleep is critical for so many things. With Shawn tonight, we're going to talk about focus and productivity and creativity, as well as health, longevity. We might even talk about sex, okay? So like Shawn has an entire chapter on that in his book, Sleep Smarter. And you guys, if you haven't read it, in fact, I would say this, if you read one book in the next 30 days that will absolutely change your life in how you feel, your sense of well-being, you've got to read Sleep Smarter. And we'll put a link up here in just a little bit. Okay, so third question I want to ask you, again, just part of the pre-show. We're going to get started here in about 3 minutes. What is your biggest challenge when it comes to getting enough sleep? What is your biggest challenge when it comes to getting enough sleep? Okay, let's go back to the comments here. All right, you guys on Periscope? You got anything to say? What's your biggest challenge when it comes to getting enough sleep? And also on YouTube, let's see here. Okay, so here we go on Facebook. Vassal says, how could a person survive on 5 to 6 hours? Do you really sleep this little? Man, I know people that are surviving on that little sleep. I have a very good friend of mine, I won't name him, but he's a chronic insomniac. He gets about 4 hours sleep a night. He also reads a book a day. So, the question is it sustainable? Marie says, 9 hours, big change from working days when I had kids. Lack of sleep led to a major crash, which took 3 to 4 years to recover from. I don't doubt it. Maria says, discipline. Yeah, I don't know about you guys. I find that getting up is not a problem. It's getting to bed on time that's typically my biggest problem. Melissa says, getting my mind to quit going over everything I need to do. Loria says, overcommitment. I love waking up early so that regardless of when I go to sleep. Yep. Jackie says, waking up constantly through the night. Crystal says, my children keep me busy until late. All right, guys, we're a little over a minute out, and I just want to, again say this show is going to be extraordinary, and I want to encourage you guys to stay with us the entire time. It's going to be super interesting. I've got some questions prepared for Shawn. This is actually the second time I've interviewed him, so I know him. I've been on his show, which is the Model Health Show, one of the top-rated podcasts in iTunes Health. In fact, #1 rated in iTunes Health category. Tremendous show. But he's a sleep expert. Like I said earlier, if you're just joining us, I'm a sleep enthusiast. I'm not a sleep expert, but I really try to study this stuff because I know how much better I feel when I've had sufficient sleep. And I picked up some tips in Shawn's book that honestly I found nowhere else that really moved the needle on the quality of my sleep, not just the quantity. I've always, I guess in the last 10 years or so, I've gotten the quantity of sleep, but it's not always been the quality of sleep. And for me, I can fall asleep anywhere very quickly. The challenge for me is staying asleep. And Shawn's tips, his strategies have helped me stay asleep longer. And usually I'm waking up about once during the night, and that's it. Otherwise, I'm sleeping soundly through the entire night. So it's fantastic. Okay, about 24 more seconds to go. Again, I want to encourage you guys to share your questions. I'm going to be getting to those throughout the show. So whatever you have, regardless of the question about sleep, this is your chance. I don't want you to come to this end of the show and think, if I'd only ask this. There's no reason why you can't be getting better sleep, feeling better, being more healthy, and living longer. And Shawn is the man that's going to help us. All right, let's get started. Every person viewing today's show has one thing in common. We all know what it's like to be overwhelmingly busy. And when we find ourselves with more tasks than time, one of the first solutions we fall back on is to try to get by on less sleep. We try to cheat, right? I've done it, you've done it. But what if our willingness to shortchange sleep was actually sabotaging our success? Well, according to tonight's guest, Shawn Stevenson, that's exactly what we're doing. Shawn is the author of Sleep Smarter, which I've now read almost completely twice. But in the book, he outlines 21 essential strategies that allow us to sleep our way to a better body, better health, and bigger success. Hello, I'm Michael Hyatt. Welcome to my live show where each week I talk with a different thought leader about some aspect of personal development, productivity, or leadership. My goal is to help you win at work, succeed at life, and lead with confidence. Let's get started. Shawn is a leading health, wellness, and sleep expert, and in addition to his best-selling book, his podcast, The Model Health Show, has been featured as the #1 health podcast on iTunes with millions of downloads each year. And I've asked him to come on and talk about sleep. He's also a popular keynote speaker. His work has been featured in Entrepreneur Magazine, Men's Health Magazine, ESPN, Fox News, a lot of major media outlets. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Michael, so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's so awesome to have you, man. I learned so much from you the first time we talked when I did my productivity summit, and reading your book has been amazing. And the second time through it, I'm picking up stuff that I missed the first time. But can I just say this? Here's the thing I love about you. You're unbelievable as a researcher. I mean, you get the science and you go to the journals, you get the primary research, but it's not academic. You know, you put the cookies down on the shelf. You've got all these power tips and these strategies that any of us can implement. And I just love how practical you are. It's very rare to find somebody that can do both those things.
I appreciate that. And please understand it was definitely calculated because my first articles and blog posts, I was definitely writing like I was writing for a medical journal. Please don't go back and read those articles, by the way. They're terrible. And it really, what's enabled the show and the book to be so successful and to impact the lives of so many people is just speaking in my voice and being a real person, somebody who's cool to hang around and talk to and that can provide value to your life. That's what we all aspire to be for others. And so I want to be that with my persona online as well, just an extension of that. And I'm so honored that you even acknowledged that. So thank you.
Well, I'm delighted to have you on. Let's start at the beginning. What does it mean to sleep smarter?
Perfect. What's so fascinating is that there's a big change now in the world of nutrition. And by trade, I'm a clinical nutritionist. And today, I don't have to talk about a lot of the things that I used to talk about 10 years ago. That a calorie is not just a calorie, for example. The quality of that calorie matters a lot. And so, as an example, 200 calories of broccoli is going to impact your endocrine system, your hormones, your nervous system, your neurotransmitters, way different than 200 calories of Twinkies. All right, we understand this. So, but here's the difference is that in the context of sleep, it's very similar. Many times we often mistake the fact that somebody might be getting 8 hours of sleep with the fact that the quality is as good as it should be. Whereas many people who are sleeping the, quote, right amount of hours, which I don't even mention how many hours you should get in the book, but they're getting 7, 8, 9 hours of sleep, but still waking up feeling like a piñata after the party. It's because the quality of those minutes are being sacrificed. And there are many things that we are doing unknowingly today that are damaging our sleep cycles. And so what Sleep Smarter really means is creating more efficient sleep cycles, right? And to give a really quick, brief summation or bullet point about this, our sleep cycles are between about 75 minutes and 120 minutes on average. And on average, we need to get about 4 to 6 of those each night, complete sleep cycles for our brain, our nervous system, our endocrine system, our internal organs, our muscles, our amazing body to be fully recovered. And so what's happening is we're unknowingly, again, with some of the things we'll talk about today, interrupting or breaking apart those sleep cycles.
Yep.
So even though we're unconscious for 8 hours or whatever the case might be, we might only be getting 6 hours accumulation of sleep. So that's what Sleep Smarter really is about, is how can we optimize the sleep that you are getting? Whether you're sleeping 6 hours or 8, we want to make sure that it's rock star 6 to 8 hours so you wake up feeling like somebody who's on a mission to accomplish your goals.
Fantastic. Well, it's one of those things that I think we either know how to do or we don't know how to do, right? I mean, to think about being intentional and that we can actually learn to do it better is a paradigm shift for most of us.
Right.
But I want to ask this, why does sleep matter so much and what effects does it have on our day-to-day life?
Oh my goodness. Let's start with and this is just with all of us today we're going to make an agreement to be honest with ourselves.
Yes.
Nobody's waking up in the morning like, you know what? I want to look terrible today. I want everybody to tell me how bad I look. Nobody says that. We all want to look good. We all want to feel attractive. And so I'm going to use that point first because this is the biggest kind of visceral thing for us as humans. Our success is kind of, for some people it's not the big trigger. And so there was a study that was done recently by the University of Chicago. And it blew my mind. And so here's what happened. They took individuals and they put them on a calorie-restricted diet. And this is something I would do clinically. It's what I was taught in a university setting that I should do, which I don't necessarily agree with today. But they put them on a calorie-restricted diet in order to help them to lose body fat, specifically not just weight, but body fat. And on this first phase of the study, they allowed them to get 8.5 hours of sleep, and they tracked their results. Another phase of the study, they had them on the same exact diet. They're not exercising any more, any less. They didn't change anything with the diet. But they sleep deprived them. They took away 3 full hours of their sleep. And at the end of the study, they found that they lost 55% more body fat when they were getting enough sleep. Nothing else changed in their life. Just getting adequate sleep triggered a 55% greater body fat loss. You can't get those kind of results beating yourself down in the gym every single day or even cutting more calories. You're going to hit a wall. Your body's going to kick into starvation programs. So the bottom line is what's going on behind the scenes that's causing all this to happen. Number one, please understand you can actually get more fit by sleeping more. And for me, it's sleeping smarter, not just more. And behind the scenes, what's going on is, and I'll just share 3 keys with you here. Number one, there's a big shift that is involving something called human growth hormone. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people have probably heard of this because of like Barry Bonds or whatever, Jason Giambi and all that whole PED thing. But human growth hormone is very important. This is something that your pituitary gland secretes. And you get the greatest secretion of this powerful hormone during sleep, during the deepest, most anabolic stages of sleep. And the quotes to put around this is also it's known as the youth hormone. All right. So this keeps you vital, youthful, energetic, and it also is muscle sparing and accelerates recovery. All right. So it's very, very important for those factors. Number 2, melatonin. Melatonin is this glorified sleep hormone a lot of people know about, but it's also powerful for fat loss. So there's a study that was in the journal Pioneer Research, and they found that melatonin increases something called brown adipose tissue, aka BAT, all right? Or you can call it BAT fat for short. All right, so this BAT fat burns white adipose tissue, which is kind of the gooey stuff that people are trying to get rid of. And so brown adipose tissue functions a lot like muscle does. And you only have a small amount at different places in your body, around your collarbone, shoulder blades. But the more you have this brown adipose tissue, the more fat you burn because it's dense. What makes it brown is that it has a lot more mitochondria. And mitochondria are the energy power plants in your cells. So it literally gives you more energy, burns more fat. Last thing here, and then we'll shift gears over into success performance, is cortisol. Right, cortisol has gotten a bad rap recently in the media. It's getting blamed for all the problems. Cortisol is keeping me fat. Cortisol's keeping me inflamed. Cortisol made my girlfriend break up with me. Whatever it is, cortisol is getting blamed, but it's not a bad guy. It's just kind of misunderstood. And so if it's produced at the wrong time and the wrong amount, it can definitely cause problems. But sleep deprivation, as you see in the study, when they sleep deprive them, cortisol intrinsically elevates. Cortisol suppresses melatonin. Big problem. And also cortisol has this interesting ability to break down your muscle tissue, and muscle burns fat, and turn it into glucose. All right, it's a process called gluconeogenesis. And thus it's going to trigger insulin and make your muscle now, is it going to end up getting stored as fat on your body. So that's why sleep is so important for changing your body. And if I can share really quickly, Michael, this would be a super quick thing. Yeah. When it comes to success and performance, there's a study in the Lancet. This was just a couple of years ago. And this was a study done on physicians, all right? So they had the physicians, they had them to complete a task, all right? Then they sleep deprived them for just 24 hours, which is not uncommon. They had them to come back and do the same exact task. Now, here's what's so interesting. Same exact thing, just now they're sleep deprived. They made 20% more mistakes doing the same exact thing, and it took them 14% longer to do the same exact thing. So a lot of us today, we're mistaking doing work for being effective. We're causing a lot of problems for ourselves and not really being able to elicit our full capacity with creativity, with drive, motivation, and focus because we're sleep deprived. Our sleep deprived brains do not function as well as they could. And there's a lot of reasons behind the curtain that we could talk about as well.
Well, it's so true. I mean, all of us have had that experience where we're trying to work on a project late at night. You find yourself reading the same paragraph over and over again because you just can't focus. Your brain's just not functioning. Get a good night's sleep, wake up in the morning, and that task that was taking you hours, bam, you can knock it out because now all of a sudden you've had the sleep that's necessary to perform at that highest level. I remember when I first started working out with my personal trainer several years ago, and I wanted to, build up my muscles. I wanted to have more strength, and I wanted to have more lean muscle mass. And the first thing he said to me was, are you willing to improve the quality of your sleep? Because that's where it starts. Because like elite athletes, that's like one of the main things. It's amazing. Some of those Olympians will sleep 9, 10, 11 hours of sleep a night. And he said, you got to be willing to sleep. And then number two, what about your nutrition? Because he said, all in all, fitness is important, but it's about 20% of the equation. I don't know if that percentage is right, but I thought it was interesting that he prioritized sleep over everything else.
Yeah, that is so heartwarming to hear that, because that's where your body really changes, Michael, is during sleep. If you and I go in, we're about to do a workout and we're just looking at the weights, we're in better shape just looking at the weights. After we pick them up and start working out, we're actually breaking our body down. All right, it's called a hormetic stressor. We're tearing down muscle fibers, muscle tissue. And actually, if after our workout, we go and get a blood panel done and a hormone panel, cortisol is going to be elevated, insulin is going to be dysfunctional. We can maybe even get diagnosed with something and get put on some medication. And this was just from doing a great workout. It's not that the workout is bad. A hormetic stressor means your body comes back better once you get recovered. And I love you mentioned the professional athletes. I quoted Usain Bolt in the book, and he actually said that sleep is a part of his training. This is where his body actually takes on his training, and he understands that. And last thing is the brain. This is so huge in this whole equation where, we're looking at what's going on with our brains when I'm sleep deprived. Well, UC Berkeley, and I love that to actually see it, not just to see the study, but to see the physical example. They did brain imaging scans, and they looked what happened with, again, just 24 hours of sleep deprivation, and they found that all the test subjects had a decrease in activity in the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of your brain responsible for social control, for distinguishing between right and wrong, for decision making. All right, and that part of the brain starts to shut down. And they also found this about exactly the more human part of our brain. And there's a 6% reduction in glucose reaching to the brain overall, but 14% reduction from your prefrontal cortex. Basically, we start to become like the Dumb and Dumber version of ourselves. Yes, the Lloyd version of ourselves. And so what they found, coupled with that, there was more activity in another part of the brain, which was interesting. Less in the prefrontal cortex, more in the amygdala. Now, the amygdala is often cited as being our more primitive or reptilian part of our brain. And it's mainly responsible for survival of self. That's its main concern, right? Survival of self. So if people, I don't know if you've ever noticed this before, this might be the first time it's kind of brought to your attention, but it tends to be couples have a greater incidence of getting into arguments and not solving the problems when they're sleep deprived. And I did a whole episode of my show on this, and the statistics were absolutely mind-blowing. And so it's understanding we start to show up differently as not the best version of ourselves at work, in our relationships, and we're setting ourselves up at a disadvantage because this sleep-deprived brain, you can't help but be more concerned about yourself and not thinking about the bigger picture.
That's powerful. Okay, we got a lot of questions coming in, and I'm going to get to those here in just a second, but I want to encourage you guys, please, please, please ask your questions. Shawn's here. He's the expert, and he can answer your questions. So let's go ahead and take a few of those now, because I see we've got one in from Facebook. Don Riddell asks, what about sleep tracking apps? Any recommendations?
Wow. So I'm not a big fan of the self-quantification personally, because of, and I talked about this in a chapter of the book, we want our sleep to be as low tech as possible. That's kind of like a sacred place. We want to create a sleep sanctuary. And there is strong evidence that electromagnetic fields that are generated by our devices in our bedroom disrupt the communication between the cells in our bodies. So with that said, it can be interesting or eye-opening to do some tracking and self-quantification, but I don't want you to rely on that. My main go-to is, how do you feel, right? Paying attention to our bodies again. How do you feel? How do you look? How do you perform? And those are all things that are easily assessed if we're simply paying attention. But a lot of times we feel so crappy all the time. It's just like a low grade level of crappiness. And that's just kind of how we live. And so once we start to feel better, it's like, we're walking on sunshine all of a sudden. And so by optimizing your sleep and getting maybe a base point of where you are, that would be a great idea. Now, with that said, there are devices in the works, and I'm actually being called upon to be somebody who's kind of overseeing a process of one of these products that won't require Wi-Fi connection, that kind of thing, for your device to be tracking you, right? It's kind of like it's off of the heat map in a way. So there's going to be some things coming about as we understand that some of these things can be problematic. So I hope that answers your question. There are tons of different apps out there, but
Yep.
I'm more wanting you to quantify by how you feel.
Okay, that leads me to a question. So like just today when I was out exercising, doing my cardio, I was listening to your chapter about devices, and I got really convicted about this. But here's the deal. Like, I have 5 kids, I have 8 grandkids, I've got elderly parents, and I want to be able to be reached in the middle of the night if there's an emergency. So how can I get my cell phone out of my room, out of my bedroom, and yet still be available if it's an emergency? Is like, if I have it 20 feet away, is it okay? If I have it 6 feet away, is it okay? Or does it really just have to be out of the room completely?
That's a great question. And so, a lot of the points in the book, I am going for what is optimal, like
Right.
mastery level. But I do share a lot of different power tips that are just like, if you're at this place, try this. If you're at that place, try this. So when it comes to cell phones, what I want to really do is wake people up to the fact of, we're talking about 80% of people over the years of like 18 to 25, between that age range, are sleeping with their phone right next to their head at night. Literally, it's like on the pillow next to them. Okay, so we want to be aware that that's not a healthy behavior for sure. And plus, to be honest, again, people are like, I want to be able to be reached, but they're keeping their tweets on, they're keeping on their instant messaging, they're keeping on their, notifications and this thing, and they've got these chimes constantly going off and interrupting their sleep cycles. That's not smart, and it's just not worth it. And if you think about it, as we go back, and Michael, you and I remember this time when we didn't have cell phones, all right? And people wanted to get in touch with you. If you left the house, you actually are gone. Like, nobody can get in touch with you, period. And this is also a time when people could show up at your house, But today, you better text me. You better call before you come. You better call me in the driveway at least, and give me a heads up. So we can survive without the phone being right there next to our heads.
Okay.
Now, with that said, as far as the concern with the EMF fields, it'll even say on many of the boxes for our smartphones to not put it directly up to your head. All right, and I shared a study in the book that's found, there's different court cases going on right now, an increase in midbrain tumors, especially for kids, because of their continued exposure. Their bones being smaller and their brains being in the developmental process by having access to cell phones since birth, really, like they're growing up in this condition. So what we want to do is understand that is an issue that we have not evolved to deal with yet. But we don't. I love it. It's right here. My iPhone is right here. But we have a relationship. We have an understanding. And so, yes, even a few feet across the room, Michael, if you just put your cell phone across the room on your dresser or whatever, that's okay. We don't want to be too neurotic about it. But also, we do want to make sure that at least turn off the other notifications. You can just keep your ringer on for people calling you, like that just have your number, friends and family, if it's an emergency. Yep. Outside of that, you don't need to be getting email notifications. You don't need to be getting, notifications on Instagram. All of that can wait till in the mornings when you actually feel good and you can crush it.
Okay, here's the thing that people may not know, but on your iPhone, you can turn it on Do Not Disturb, right? And you can actually schedule that. So mine goes off at 9 o'clock at night, and it doesn't come back on until 8 o'clock in the morning. But here's the cool thing. If somebody in your contact list is also a favorite, they can get through. Okay, so even in the middle of the night, nobody else can get through. I'm not hearing text messages, definitely not any social media messages, and no phone calls when I'm on Do Not Disturb unless they're on my favorites list. So my mom's there, my dad's there, my kids are there, but that gives me comfort to know that I'm not going to be disturbed unless it's somebody that's really important to me. So
I love that. This is why I love talking to you, Michael, because you have those little insights about our tech as well that you could bring to the table. That's fantastic.
Awesome. Okay, one more question I want to get here. This one's from YouTube. And by the way, I see questions here from Stephanie and Luria and John and Clay and Bent and Z. They're coming in from all different, all three platforms. But I want to take Stephanie's. She said, should we listen to music while we sleep? Is it helpful? If so, what type of music is best? Great question.
Yeah, that's absolutely a great question. And here's what's fascinating. So I think it's a mutual friend of ours, Jim Quick, and he just did a recent episode of his podcast, which I helped him, kind of just the getting started process. And he talked about one of the techniques for limiting this kind of sub-vocalization. So when basically you're hearing your own voice as you're reading and it slows you down, is to play music while you're doing it. And it can be a little bit of a distraction. So the same thing holds true with people who tend to have a lot of inner chatter. It can be a distraction from that, being able to play some music. And so the reason that I would employ some music for some people is as something called, it's basically a neural association, or
Yes.
I think you call it an activation trigger. Is that right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay. So this neural association, we have this process. Like we get ready for work, we get ready to go out on a date, but we don't get ready for sleep, right? People get ready for school,
Right.
we get ready for everything in our life, but we don't get ready for bed anymore. And I say anymore because many of us growing up, our parents, our grandparents had a bedtime ritual for us. But when we got our big boy pants on, big girl pants, we're like, I can do what I want. And we just kind of stumble into sleep now, like I really should get to bed. Like last thing we do is like turn off the TV or get off our phone. It's like, I really should get to bed. And there's not a strong neural association connected in a process for sleep. And I did a whole episode on this recently. And so to create a neural association, and somebody mentioned having a kid, right? A new baby.
Right.
I have three kids myself, so I understand. My son, Braden, my youngest son, who's 5 now, he was sleeping through the night around 10 hours after 6 weeks. And it was even, up until that was consistent after 6 weeks. Up until that, there were some times, but it was still getting in process. It's because we were creating consciously, because I know this stuff, I'm creating a neural association for him, a pattern, a process that we did every time. And that included playing a certain music, which we, even till recently, were playing for him. And it's just like, it's so crazy because a lot of people, and I've seen this again with my daughter early on, who's my oldest, because I wasn't aware of these things. The whole getting up at night and this and that is going on. This kid is asleep within 5-10 minutes of getting in that bed every night without fail.
Wow.
Maybe we've had I can count on my hand how many times he hasn't. And the music is a trigger.
Yes.
And now it could be a concern because I'm like, what if he's like 30 and somebody plays this music when he's like sitting on a bus or something and he just passes out. This is something to understand, to use to our advantage, but it's just creating a neural association. That would be the most valuable aspect of it, is playing a certain type of music, having a process. Maybe it includes putting on your pajamas, brushing your teeth, reading a fiction book, and then putting the music on. And you could even set it so that it turns off, right, after a certain amount
Totally.
of time. So, yes, I think it would be a valuable thing to add in for some people who tend to have a little bit more inner chatter.
Great. One of the things I advocate in my Free to Focus course is this concept of rituals. And I advocate at least 4, having a morning ritual, having a workday startup ritual, a workday shutdown ritual, and a nighttime ritual, where there's a series of things that I go through, just like you're talking about. It's almost like a program that I run that acts as a trigger to set me up for sleep. And I don't do this anymore, but for years when Gail and I had difficulty falling to sleep, we had this playlist of 4 songs that we listened to every night. And it was just a trigger. It was a psychological trigger that let us know that it's time to go to sleep and gave us sort of a process to get there. And it was hugely, hugely helpful.
Wow, that's fascinating. Before we move on, I've got to mention this because as I mentioned earlier, I just did an entire episode dedicated to how do you create an evening routine that even helps you to burn more fat, to make your brain more effective. And part of that burn more fat is actually insurance against weight gain. And so the consistency is really a big part of this whole equation when we're talking about sleep and sleep quality. And there was a study that was published in Current Biology, and they looked at 65,000 different people's sleep behavior. And they found that the individuals who have the greatest distance or greatest change between their weekly routine, their weekly bedtime, and their weekend bedtime, the people had the greatest difference were basically they were staying up on the weekends and going to bed a little bit earlier on the weekdays. They found that they were 3 times more likely to be obese.
Wow.
Simply changing that sleep schedule. And what's going on there? Basically what we're doing is something called social jet lag. It's a new terminology that we're really working to push in the culture. And it's sort of like on Friday, after our work week is over, you know, we've been kind of sticking to a routine. It's like on Friday, we hop on a plane and go to Paris. And then we hang out there, we're trying to get adjusted, and then we fly back, you know, to New York City on Monday or on Sunday night. And our body is just in flux, constantly trying to figure it out. And the most important word today or term is biological rhythms. When it comes to sleep, your body is always looking for patterns, always looking for consistency. So it can produce hormones at the right times and to keep you healthy and kind of in sync with all of nature. But we can jump in and gum that system up by changing our routine so drastically just because it's a different day. Now, with that said, there are times to party. There are times to hang out with family, holidays, that kind of thing. But we want to make that in the exception, not the rule. We don't want to just proactively mess up our physiology and feel crappy on Monday simply because a new season of Game of Thrones came out, right? And by the way, you could still watch Game of Thrones, like just binge watch it on a weekend or something during the day.
Perfect. Shawn is a graduate of the University of Missouri St. Louis. He studied business, biology, and kinesiology. His passion for health has some very personal roots. And Shawn, I'd love for you to tell us the story of how you first became fascinated by the subject of sleep, basically the way you opened the book.
Sure. Yes, this was definitely out of my own problems, my own desperation, my biggest struggle. And so this was 17 years ago now, when I was 20 years old. And I was diagnosed with a really devastating illness. It was something called degenerative disc disease, degenerative bone disease, degenerative spinal disease. And essentially my physician at the time, even though he meant well, he told me that I had the spine of an 80-year-old person. And even upon my desire to find a way to get better, he told me there's nothing that can be done about it. This is just something that happens and I'm going to have to live with it. Luckily, I had the wherewithal, and I highly encourage people to do this. If you ever get bad news like that from a physician, make sure you get a second, third, fourth opinion before you make a decision that could change the course of your life. And but the not so good news was that, you know, every physician I saw said the same thing. And I had a decision to make. You know, at this point, as 2.5 years went by, terrible, just absolutely chronic pain on level 1 to 10 scale. My sciatic nerve pain, whenever I'd stand up from sitting down, was a 10. It made me fear standing up. And I would spend as much time as I could laying down and sitting down. I was terrified. And for me, even saying that right now, it just seems like that's not even my life. I can't believe that I allowed that to happen. But I had to make a decision. And I could either keep putting off what could be done and hoping somebody's going to come along with some solution for me, some magic solution, or I could do something about it. And the truth is, even though our physicians mean well, which I have amazing physician partners and friends in my life today, they can't do your push-ups for you, right? As Jim Rohn says, nobody can do your push-ups for you. Nobody can make this body work better for you. You have to take the action. And so I put a plan together that entailed 3 specific things. One was changing the raw materials that I was giving my body so it can actually regenerate. What a concept. And I was on the tough diet at the time, what I call the tough diet, typical university food. So a lot of Papa John's, a lot of Sunny Delight was like my jam. And so, but I changed the quality of the nutrients I was bringing into my body. Movement was incredibly important. Your body literally requires movement in order to heal itself. And so I talk about a study and why that was so important in the book. But the biggest key in what changed everything was when I got my sleep on point. And so my struggle was at night when I went to bed because the pain was so bad that even if I changed positions, it would send that sciatic nerve shock down my leg and wake me up. It was terrible. And so I found a chemical cocktail. So what worked best for me was Celebrex, which was my prescription medication, and Tylenol PM seemed to work the best for me. And so I'd medicate myself to try to keep myself asleep. And what developed was, I did sleep a little bit longer, but it was pseudo sleep. And so I woke up in a fog. I woke up as a zombie for the first hour or two. And if I'm in college trying to get my degree, that was difficult. I went from a 12 credit load down to a 3 credit load because I kept dropping classes. I just couldn't keep up. And so once my sleep got optimized, because of changes I was making during the day, which is all what Sleep Smarter is about, it's like the floodgates open and everything I'd been working for changed. I lost 28 pounds in about 6 weeks. And the pain I've been experiencing for, 2.5 years was gone. And it's just like, how is that even possible? Well, I do detail the story a little bit more, but I did get a scan done to look at the before and after. And I regenerated the tissue in my spine that I lost, my bone density increased, and my 2 herniated discs that were causing me so much pain because of the sciatic nerve pain had retracted on their own. During sleep, I gave my body an opportunity to heal because that's when the healing process really takes place.
I love that story. Thank you for sharing it. I want to get in some more questions because they are coming in fast and furious. So maybe we could kind of do these in rapid fire. Luria asked, my new smart bed tells me I toss and turn a lot. Would love to hear how to make that sleep more sound and beneficial.
Wow. So this would be a really individual situation here. What could be causing the tossing and turning could be a number of things. I'm just going to throw a couple out there. We'll go rapid fire, some things to consider. Number one is the climate, all right? The temperature in your bed itself can mean a lot. It can really make or break your sleep quality. To the degree, your body has a process called thermal regulation. And at night, there's a normal, natural drop in your core body temperature to facilitate sleep. If you run too hot via, the covers insulating, creating more heat, your mattress itself, the smart mattress might be not so smart when it comes to keeping you cool, and also the room temperature itself. And so most experts agree that between 62 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit is optimal for sleep. And in Sleep Smarter, I actually detail a study where they take people with clinical insomnia, proven chronic sleep disorders, and they fitted them with these cooling caps that cooled off their heads just 1 degree. And they virtually eliminated, to the degree that they fell asleep faster than people without insomnia, and they slept almost as long, simply by cooling them off 1 degree. So temperature could be a factor. Also, there could be an issue with a caffeine sensitivity. Maybe you're not having it before bed, but even 6-8 hours out can be something that triggers people's nervous systems to stay kind of on fire. Also, there's some issues potentially with some mineral deficiencies, right? Some more calmative type minerals like magnesium, potassium, calcium, that could be an issue that has somebody up moving around.
In the book, you talk about magnesium topically applied. I think the brand is Ease. I've been using that since we talked. Fantastic. We sleep at 68 degrees, which initially felt to us cold, but I sleep so much better when I sleep at that temperature. In fact, I could go a little bit colder, but Gail likes it at that temperature. So this is the kind of practical stuff, guys. Inside of Sleep Smarter, you've got to get the book. There's a whole chapter on just the temperature of your room. Clay Patterson on Facebook asked, what should I be eating before I sleep? And I just want to expand on his question. What should I not be eating apart from caffeine before I go to sleep?
Got it. Yes, this is such a great question. This is one of my favorite chapters to write because being a nutritionist, it was like, and learning and having to go through my own mental framework and to come to the understanding that my sleep is actually more important than the food and exercise combined, when I built so much of my career on it, was a little bit, it was hard for me to wrap my own mind around, but it's absolutely true. And so being able to tie in the nutrition with sleep is just really fascinating. So here's the big takeaway from this. Melatonin that we talked about earlier. What I was taught in a university setting was that your pineal gland produces melatonin, end of story. Now, here's the issue. There's 400 times more melatonin in your gut than in your brain, all right, than in your pineal gland. 400 times.
Wow.
It's absurd. Most of your sleep activity, this sleep hormone, is hanging out in your belly. So what's going on in that environment is of the utmost importance in how it affects your sleep, because basically, and I break this down a little bit more because, just the time structure here, I'd love to share, but bottom line is that certain bacteria in our gut influences the production and storage of these hormones. And whether or not we're taking care of these good bacteria or giving full reign for more kind of opportunistic bacteria to take over our body is a big, big issue here that we need to get sorted out. So the chapter was fix your gut to fix your sleep. Now, with that said, what do we eat? Well, before bed itself, since the question asked before bed, it's really about managing your blood sugar. Because if you eat something that's too kind of high glycemic and you get this sugar spike and it's too close to bedtime and you go to sleep, because actually getting this kind of feel-good spike can help you to fall asleep. But if you go hypoglycemic during sleep, it's going to mess up those sleep cycles. It's going to change the modulation of your brain, being able to shift gears from stage 1 to stage 2, stage 3, 4, and cycle back and forth because there's a dysregulation in blood sugar. So we want to make sure the blood sugar stays stable late at night. So what I would recommend is, if you can, and this is where the whole concept of not eating before bed actually does have some weight. It's not about weight gain or weight loss, and I disprove that. It's really about making sure you're getting optimal sleep. Try to finish your meal at least 2 hours before bed is the biggest recommendation that I have. But if you do want to have a snack, closer to bedtime, make sure that it's something that's lower glycemic. So this would be a good idea to have, some, seed butter or nut butter, and maybe some veggies along with that, or, like a handful of nuts, some, a protein bar that's very low glycemic, maybe some kind of, beef jerky or buffalo sticks or something like that. Just something that has less glucose response before bed. That's the ideal thing you want to go for.
So basically, no pasta, no white bread, no pizza, all that high glycemic stuff is not good for your blood sugar and is going to injure your sleep.
Exactly. Injure your sleep and potentially give you diabetes.
That's another good point. Okay, man, our time, unbelievably, is almost gone. So I've got one more question here from our audience, and then I've got one that I would ask you. I've gotten like to half of the questions that I have. This is so fascinating. So this is a question that came from Z on Periscope, and he said, what should you do if you wake several times to go to the bathroom? How do you still get quality sleep? I mean, we're on the honest planet, and Z's being honest, so what do you do about that?
Wow, it's a great question. So I would first, of course, this is individual basis. When people would come into my clinic, we're looking at what's the issue for them, the underlying thing. This could be a prostate issue. This could be a bladder issue. I don't know. But the first thing we're going to look at here, we'll just say that those two things aren't necessarily the issue. It's just that, hey, maybe he's drinking a nice amount of water before he goes to bed. Don't do that. All right, get your water intake in earlier in the day so your bladder doesn't have much to empty out. So what does that look like? Well, because also we don't want to be dehydrated when we go to bed. And my wife has been doing this for years until recently. When I actually wrote a book on sleep, she started listening to me a little bit more. But she would drink the majority of her water before bed. And in the morning, when I'm doing, and I've been advocating this a long time, part of our morning ritual is to take an inner bath, right? And for me, that's drinking about 1 liter of high-quality structured water first thing in the morning. So I'm already getting a jump start on that hydration level so that when I get to the evening time, I'm not dehydrated and just want to guzzle water right before I go to bed. So be proactive in that to get your water in earlier. Now, if this is an issue, a prostate issue, there are wonderful supplement protocols, natural solutions that are out there for that. And then, of course, we can look at allopathic medicine as well. But we want to figure out what the underlying cause is and not just go and, treat you with a drug or surgery if we can potentially remove the underlying cause. So whether it's bladder related, prostate related, or something else, or this could be an issue with, and I could talk about 10 different things, Michael, antidiuretic hormone, which is hypothalamus acting funny and, connecting with your kidneys and all these different things. But the bottom line is we've got to remove the underlying cause of what might be driving you to go pee, even if your bladder is not full. But the big thing is, let's just make sure we're going to bed with our bladder pretty much empty in the first place.
That's good. First thing I do when I get up in the morning, before I allow myself a cup of coffee, and I love coffee, but before I'll drink a cup of coffee, I have to drink a full glass of water, 12 ounces, before I do that. And that gets me set on the hydration, because you do get dehydrated overnight. You haven't had any water, and probably even before you go to bed. So that's good advice on your part. Okay, one last question. I cannot believe we're out of time, but one last question. You know, we live in a culture, and a lot of people live in a work culture where people, I don't know, they like skimp on sleep and wear it as a badge of honor. And you argue that they're sabotaging their own success. Why is that?
Yes, so there's a lot of memes out there. There's the hashtags, no sleep. I'll sleep when I'm dead. Right?
Yep.
Sleep is for suckers. Sleep is for the weak. You don't hear that kind of terminology with anything else. You don't hear like candies for the weak, right? You don't hear Twinkies are for the weak. Sleep is for the weak. And I'll tell you right now, I've actually talked with a lot of the individuals who promoted this and pushed this in the culture. I'm not kidding. Like some of the top guys. And I promise you, like Gary Vaynerchuk is a good example. This whole crush it thing. And I had a conversation with him sitting down. Of course, there's the wine involved. He's, the wine guy.
Right.
And I asked, like, so what's the deal here? I've seen a change with you recently, and basically put a bigger shift on his health and his fitness and being a little bit more mindful about his sleep because he's now playing the long game. Like he really saw, like, if I'm going to be in this for the long game, I need to take care of my health and fitness. And so he's made a shift in that. But he does acknowledge still, and he still pushes this out in the culture that, there are stages where you do need to hustle and to maybe, burn the midnight oil, which I don't advocate. I'm more on the Chalene Johnson camp, where she's just like, we can have it all along the way. And
Yep.
It's simply sitting back and being honest about what we want and creating the structure to do it. And so we see those things out there that tell us that, sleep is for the weak. When in reality, most of the people who are buying into that are not successful. I promise you, they're not even close to successful. There are the anomalies. There are definitely anomalies who make that happen. But I've seen this far too often. They fizzle out. They burn out. They create massive problems in their metabolism, in their endocrine system. They just really hurt themselves physically because of them chasing that almighty dollar. So what I'm bringing to the culture is the fact that, number one, not only, I shared the study earlier, this is about being effective, right? This is not doing the most stuff. Like, let me see how much work I can do. Can you actually get something done? That's the question. Can you actually accomplish your goal and not just do busy work? And so often we get caught up doing this busy work and things that are less important because we can't take control of our own brains because we're sleep deprived. And so what we really need to understand is this. We've been really inundated in our culture with this idea that if we're going to get something, there's no free lunch. If we're going to get something, we've got to work hard. I totally agree. I've probably worked harder than most people you know. Now, this is the important takeaway is that with that belief, we have to look at it clearly and understand that carrying that belief, we think that something like sleep, because we're not doing anything, we can't get results from it. There is something in our brains that's telling us that. That's why sleep is the first thing to get cut, because we think that I'm not doing anything anyways but sleeping so I can work more. When in reality, you getting an optimal sleep is going to enable you to wake up and actually do your job to the best of your ability. So what we want to understand, the big takeaway is that this idea of sleep is for the weak is just backwards thinking, because when we're getting that optimal sleep, this is really where your mind, body, and your spirit are getting in alignment with each other. And you're actually able to show up and to be the best version of yourself. And that's what our family wants. That's what our friends work. That's what our colleagues want. That's what the people at our workplace, our significant other, especially if you're planning on being in a happy relationship, your kids, they want the best version of you, not the beat down zombie version of you. And it really starts with you getting optimal sleep.
So true. Shawn, thank you so much for being our guest. It was fantastic. And thanks to all of you guys, whether you're on Periscope, Facebook, or YouTube. Thanks for joining us. If you guys haven't done so already, let me encourage you to grab a copy of Shawn's book, Sleep Smarter. You can get a copy on Amazon at michaelhyatt.com/sleep. And yes, that's an affiliate link, but it'll take you directly to the page. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Michael Hyatt Show. I look forward to talking with you next week, 7 o'clock Central Daylight Time. I'm going to be interviewing best-selling author and Rhodes Scholar Michael Stainer about coaching and how busy leaders can effectively coach themselves and their teams in 10 minutes or less. We'll see you guys soon.